I'm Caroline Fritz, and I'm here with co-founder and sister, Trish Hamill.
Hello.
And we like audience participation. So the first thing I'd like to do is ask you all, what does ADHD stand for? Yes?
The story of my life.
Yes, ma'am.
Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder.
That's it. Yay. Ding, 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 ding.
I live it.
Welcome to the club.
That's right.
So I have, the technical term for the type of ADHD I have is scatterbrained. And so I've got everything written out here, and I'm not going to read too closely, but I've got to follow my guide or I get off track. So we are going to start by sharing our personal stories, and what led us to starting this organization. So for many years, I used to joke with friends of mine that I had adult ADD. I have to multitask. I thrive on variety. So if I'm working on a project and it starts to get stale, I have to be able to put it up, do something completely different, and when I'm re-energized, I can go back to that project. So an apropos quote and something that must have been said by someone with ADHD is, variety is the spice of life. So in my work life right now, I do consulting work, and that's really great because I get to juggle multiple projects. But prior to this, my absolute favorite job was waiting on tables. I loved being able to manage many different customer needs and figure out, okay, this table needs a fork and they need a glass of water and this other one needs their dessert order. And it was such a rush for me to efficiently figure out everything I needed and do it all in one trip. That was my favorite job. So, okay, what does that have to do with this? Well, let's fast forward a few years. It wasn't until I had a child who struggled to stay on task in school and get his work done that I realized, or I started to learn about ADHD. And after finding out it was hereditary, I decided that I needed to get tested too. So my son and I were both diagnosed using the computer-based ADHD quotient test, which of course I thought I could beat the test. Once my kid took it and I figured out how it worked, I figured I'm going to beat this test, no problem. Well, I did not. Not only did I have ADHD, but I learned that I was more H or hyperactive than my then 8-year-old son. So this is when the light bulbs started to blink on for me. For years, I beat myself up over the fact that I couldn't seem to stay in the same job and go to the same office day after day after day. I would get depressed. I needed change. I had frequent job changes. I was always so excited to start that new job, but after 12 months in the job, once I figured it all out and fixed all the problems, I was ready to move on. I always needed that new challenge. So getting this diagnosis for me was like getting a chapter to my own personal owner's manual. So going back to my son and why we're here today, even with his diagnosis, even with trying medication, and even with having a 504 plan in place at school, I have felt year after year after year that he wasn't being served in our public schools. Frankly, I found that his success depended on his teacher. So he needs to be in a structured, organized environment in order to learn. He needs to be able to fidget and doodle and move his body just to keep his brain focused. He needs help prioritizing tasks, as do I. At one point last year, beginning of 5th grade, I was so frazzled and stressed out, I thought, I don't know how I'm going to make it through 7 more years of school. This is my 5th grade we're talking about, by the way. So what pushed me over the edge was later last year when I found out that his 5th grade teacher made him, my child, skip recess in order to complete an assignment that he had actually finished under my supervision the night before. So here's the problem. Kids need recess. We all need more movement, to be honest. But kids with ADHD, they're not going to learn a lesson from being made to skip recess. That's not the way it works for them, and we're gonna come back to that point. But what I found out, or when I found out that he was made to skip recess, I felt like there was only one thing left to do, and I immediately called my sister, who has some experience with ADHD as well. As I mentioned, it's hereditary. I felt like we have got to open up a free public charter school for students with ADHD. And after many discussions and some additional research, we came to a different conclusion, and that was, let's start a nonprofit organization where we can research best practices and for teaching students with all learning differences and implement these ideas at schools. So hence this idea was born. And the idea being that when we serve students with learning differences, we're serving all students. So I'm going to now let Trish give her personal story.
Okay, I don't look like it, but I'm so much older than Caroline. I started having kids, a long time ago. My oldest she was born in 1985. So the reason why Caroline called me is because I happen to have an education background. I was a middle school mathematics teacher and a business teacher at the high school level. So I had that, and I also have several birth children, and then I had foster children, then I adopted some foster children. We've seen all kinds of disabilities in our home and in the classroom when I was there. But in particular, I had my child, Christopher, who was born in 1986, when ADHD wasn't called ADHD, it was called your kid's hyperactive. And when he was born, he was about 4 months old, and I would tell my mother stories about, like, he's not sleeping ever, and he's just, put him in a walker, and all he does is just move and move and move, and so she started sending me newspaper articles on how to deal with hyperactive children when my baby was 4 months old. So by the time he's 7 months old, he starts walking, and then 10 months old, he's running everywhere, and then, he's a couple years old, and he's climbing. We go for a walk, he's shimmying every street sign and hitting the top, and not only was he hyper, he was not what they call ADHD hyperactive type, not scatterbrained. Well, he is scatterbrained too, but it was hyperactive type. He had a tremendous difficulty in making connections with other human beings. He never knew what was appropriate to say. I happen to have that problem myself. I think that Mom does too. So we get that from our mother. Yeah. He's kind of an irritating human being. When he was a little kid, he used to be that little kid that just kind of got under your skin and just always talking and moving and touching and just like a little tornado, all the time just moving. And as he went into school, and this popped into my head because I have ADHD, he was in first grade and he went to gym. That was his favorite class, going to that gym. And the gym teacher called me at the end of the day and said, Mrs. Hamill, I've had to tell Christopher he's not allowed to use his feet when he's climbing the rope, because he climbed that rope in the gym all the way up to the ceiling. So from then on, he was no longer allowed to use his feet. So then he'd go, and the next time he went, he wasn't allowed to use his feet. He got on that rope, and he got halfway up with just his arms. He's just going and going and going. Well, in the classroom, he was very unsuccessful. He was one of those C and D kids there, in elementary school. And when he got to 4th grade, that's kind of when the bottom fell out for our family. He had a psychiatric hospitalization. He was in the hospital for almost 3 weeks, and it was because of depression, and he was also diagnosed with ADHD at that time officially and put on medication. It was a very, I did not realize until that time that there is such a close relationship between inattentiveness and depression. Inattentiveness does cause depression. So that was 4th grade. I couldn't take it anymore. I pulled all my kids out of school and I homeschooled. So that's how I dealt with it. And now at this time, yes, I had children. My oldest was born in 1985. Okay, I have a 10-year-old now. He was born in 2009, and I'm seeing on the horizon that while right now he is functioning and I only have one child to help and kind of go behind him and keep him organized and put his folder away. I don't have 5 or 6 kids at home I'm doing that with now. He is more successful than my other children were because I'm putting in some effort, but I know the road that this will lead down, and I don't want to homeschool again. I'd like to be able to work with Caroline to help a lot of children benefit from things that we can talk to teachers about and maybe get some different practices going in the classroom that will help these kids. That's me.
So after much brainstorming with our board, we came up with our mission statement. And this mission was born from a couple of ideas. One of the problems I had with Kai and continue to have is looking at his teacher with a straight face and asking her to accommodate my child any differently than she does the 29 other kids in the classroom. Our teachers are bogged down, and there's this just guilt of, yeah, I know you have all this to do, but now you need to manage this child a little differently. So what we would love to do is create a forum to collaborate with all teachers, to share ideas. Teachers have the ideas. The teachers that are working with these kids, in many cases, don't have the resources they need, but a lot of them have the ideas. So what if we can help facilitate a forum for collaboration where we can share ideas with the educators and families to help our students be more successful. So I'm going to go up here, maybe, a little bit more pressure, okay. So we wanted to talk a little bit about what is ADHD and what is it not. So this is again going to require some audience participation. So we have some facts and myths here, and I'd like to ask for your opinion. So first one, fact or myth? ADHD is overdiagnosed in the United States. Fact or myth? Fact. That's actually a myth. So among medical professionals and educators, there's a belief that we underdiagnose in the United States. My child is the perfect example. He's what's called the inattentive type. He's not hyperactive. He doesn't really cause behavior problems at school, so he floats under the radar. He's actually classified as a daydreamer, which I sort of fall into that category as well. The problem with Kai is he can't control his brain's need to take him on a journey. So his brain and our brains need more stimulation to release dopamine and serotonin just to feel okay about life. So kids that have inattentive ADHD, or just ADD as we used to call it, are often not diagnosed, particularly girls. It's kind of like girls get a pass. Oh, she's a daydreamer. Girls are very underdiagnosed. So when I was first diagnosed, I asked my ADHD doctor if he thought we overdiagnosed in the United States. And he shared with me a really interesting perspective. A little bit of background. If you have ADHD, you're going to be a risk taker. They might be very well thought out, planned risks. But we like change, and with change, inherent to change is risk. Now, if you're a risk taker, it doesn't mean you have ADHD. But if you have ADHD, you're a bit of a risk taker. So here's what my doctor said. Who comes to the United States, by and large? Who moves here?
Risk takers.
Risk takers. We're a people that have left behind the home country, left behind everything we knew, the family farm, generations, to come and chase the American dream. So it follows, and actually research now shows that some countries are genetically more predisposed to ADHD. Russia, also very high rates of ADHD. What country do you think has very low rates of ADHD? Think very systematic and methodical. Germany, yes, very low rates of ADHD. So, okay, here's another one. Myth or fact? People with ADHD can't focus. myth. This is an interesting one. So our problem isn't that we can't focus or pay attention. It's that well, not only can we focus, we can hyper-focus. If we find an activity that really stimulates the brain, think, social media or gaming, but those types of activities we can absolutely hyper-focus on. The problem is we have a tough time regulating our focus. So we have what's called an interest-based motivation system. So rather than being motivated by a satisfied teacher or boss, unfortunately, we're motivated by a challenge, we're motivated by novelty, competition, and often looming deadlines. So I would say it's highly likely that if you're a procrastinator and you do your best work under pressure, you might have ADHD. But don't despair, because our ability to hyperfocus is truly a superpower. So when we get in the zone, we can be unstoppable. So think about Benjamin Franklin, Richard Branson, Elon Musk, even Alexander Hamilton, and of course Lin-Manuel Miranda. These are folks that have figured out how to tap into this superpower and create things that the neurotypical mind might not even imagine. So we do, as I tell my now 11-year-old son, we have superpowers, and it's a matter of learning how to use them. So the last one, fact or myth, ADHD is not a big deal. Myth, thank you. So what I learned, or when I learned, that people with ADHD, and Trish sort of touched on this, people with ADHD are at a greater risk for not only academic difficulties, but low self-esteem, drug and alcohol abuse, depression and anxiety, distracted driving, and even suicide. I realized that not only is ADHD a big deal, but that the future of our society actually depends on our finding better life solutions for children and adults with ADHD. So those are some new facts for you, and we'll jump into what we're doing, what our organization is doing today. That does take a little bit more. I don't want to break it, right? So we currently are starting morning exercise programs at schools in Greenville County. In fact, next week we're starting the Early Birds Fitness Club at Green Charter School. The number one thing, and I mentioned this earlier, we all need to move more. Because of the modernization of society, all the new technology that's been happening for centuries, really, we've become less mobile, more sedentary, and research is showing that it's impacting our brain. So we all need to be moving around more. And research also shows that kids who get exercise before school can focus then for up to 4 hours in the classroom. So number one thing is we want to promote and advocate for more movement, really in the classroom. But in the meantime, we're starting some morning exercise programs. Another challenge that Trish also touched on for us folks with ADHD is communication, connecting with people, reading expressions and reading people. So we have partnered with Toastmasters to offer their programming called the Youth Leadership Program. In fact, I was at Next High School earlier today helping facilitate this Toastmasters junior class at Next High School. Who's familiar with Toastmasters? A couple of you have heard of Toastmasters, and we at least I generally thought of Toastmasters as a way for us to learn to be comfortable with public speaking. And what I've learned since joining myself last year is it's so much more than that. So a couple of really big takeaways and things that we're able to teach these kids. After any time you give a speech at Toastmasters, you are evaluated that same day. And you learn to both give and receive feedback. So people with ADHD, I mentioned we have an interest-based motivation system. Something else that we generally have is something called rejection sensitivity dysphoria. We take things really personally. So it's really hard for us to receive feedback. So learning through this practice the way to do it, to give feedback nicely and receive it, is a tremendous gift for these students. And we're just seeing some really positive things with this program. Another element to it is learning to speak extemporaneously. And so there's a process that Toastmasters uses to put you on the spot, ask you a question, something you've never heard before, and you've got to speak for a full minute. And it allows us to collect our thoughts. When my brain's going all these different directions, it helps to learn that process and be able to speak and answer a question. My son is still like a deer in the headlights when you ask him a question and he's not prepared. It takes him a long time to collect his thoughts. So we're starting Toastmasters Junior at Green Charter School in a couple weeks as well. So these are a couple of programs that we currently have. This is all on a volunteer basis. What we're looking to do in the future is more around parent and teacher education, through lunch and learns, through health fairs. We are organizing a workshop at Green Charter to bring both parents and teachers together to talk about what helps these students and how we can get on the same page. Because really, when we talk about exercise before school, a great time to do that is when the child is at home. I mentioned earlier, we all need more movement. And so if that's something that we can do as a family, that's even better. So the longer term vision is to incorporate more of these tools into the regular school day. So using brain breaks. There was a drumming group here a couple months ago. I've talked with them about how can we incorporate a drumming exercise in the classroom and make it fun and engaging for both students and teachers. How can we provide better tools to teachers to stay more structured and organized in the classroom to better serve these students? Anything you'd like to add to that?
Want me to just kind of talk about, close out what's going on with Chris?
Sure. Well, and I think oops, I'm sorry. Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
I'll go ahead and tell you how things have turned out for Chris now that he is 32. I stopped when we decided to homeschool him. And with the help of his psychiatrist, was able to wean him off of his medications. I figured if he's at home, that we will work around the distractibility. So we designed a kind of eclectic curriculum for him to work on. Everything was pretty much interest-based. Everything that he did from the time he was in 4th grade up through when he finished high school. He was constantly working. We had the advantage of just not even having a television in our home either at that time. We had a computer in the dining room, but this was the 90s. So I think that helped a lot. He was able to find what he was really interested in. He really focused on it. He ended up going to a vocational school. He got an associate's degree in carpentry. He took that, used that to launch into some other things that he's just constantly thinking about what he wants to do and moving around. So he sells real estate and he has some property investments and he has a family and 3 kids now. And he hasn't had a problem with depression since he was a little kid. But
he also owns a business.
He has a couple of franchises. He's a pretty successful guy. And when I think of, gosh, if I hadn't been in a position where I had been able to just take the bull by the horns and take ownership of what was going on with my child, and really just become all my whole life, just be his advocate. I don't know what would have happened to him, because you see so many kids like this just failing and getting into trouble. And so anyway, this just makes me believe that there's just so much hope, and there's somewhere for everybody, and we're all designed for a purpose, and we can work with people and work with teachers and help them tap into that energy.
And fast track these kids into careers that are meaningful to them. Not everyone is made to go that same path to a 4-year college. There's so many other options. What can we do when these students are in high school And I know Greenville County Schools is doing amazing things right now with internships and partnering with organizations around Greenville. Yes.
Can I just ask a big question here?
Yeah.
Okay, so my son, it's all the, I mean, he could be your child. He is at Langston Charter Middle. They're single gender. They have great movement during the day. They have recess at lunch. It's fantastic. He is going into high school next year. My question to you is this. I love the fact that you're doing a partnership with Green Charter. I hear charter, I hear next, I hear. What is your relationship? I know you're new, I know it's a new organization. Have you had any ability to partner with Greenville County yet? Is Greenville County willing? Let me take a step back. I introduced myself as a parent. I'm also a special education advocate. I also used to be president of the Down Syndrome Family Alliance here in Greenville. I am very familiar with Greenville County and the resistance that is often put up with an outside. They like to do everything in-house, and they like to tell you, oh no, we do that training and all that kind of stuff. I'm sorry, there's Greenville County reps in here. I'm not here to badmouth Greenville County, but I'm extremely familiar with the way they operate. And because I have a child that's leaving a charter school that I have been that he's been very successful in for all the reasons that you've outlined, he's going back into a more traditional high school setting next year. I'm losing lots of sleep over it, and I'm not homeschooling. I'm just
Right. No, I'm not either.
Not fun.
No, it's hard.
Is how do we get, and I would love to talk to you about your advisory committee, how do we get Greenville County to embrace an organization like yourself so that they then get their teachers on board with learning about this disability so that they can then be better teachers to our children? Because you are so right. Our kids' success is dependent on who their teacher is. And of course, when they get in high school, they have, or really middle school, they have 6 different teachers. In elementary school, you have the luxury of hitting the nail on the head with the one teacher, and they have that teacher all day long, and if you're lucky, you've got the one good one. But in middle school, you're bouncing 6 different ones, in high school the same way, and I don't know. I have a son with Down syndrome, and I worry about him, but I'll be honest with you, my frustration is greater with my child with ADHD than it is with my kid with Down syndrome.
ADHD is more insidious. It's less recognized. It's more that kids are thought to be lazy or unmotivated when they have ADHD.
And it really is affecting my son, and I don't want him to end up doing drugs or doing things because the teachers right now are making him feel like you're bad, you're bad, you're bad, you're bad.
That's
So my thing is, and the teachers aren't bad, they're not bad. No, but it's they don't have the tools and they don't know what to do. Like I say, you go in and you're asking them to do this, and they're like, yeah, I can see the eye rolls of,
They think that we make excuses, and my kid is an ADD and attendance, and he's not a behavioral problem. It's not a behavioral issue. It's truly an academic. He has the learning. He has all the secondary things that go with the diagnosis of learning disabilities and all this stuff. And they just do not understand when I talk about the lack of executive functioning. When I say to them, you cannot do this. It's not he doesn't want to do it. They just do not get the disability at all.
Right. That thinks it's an excuse.
Yep.
So mine is our question.
So I love the fact that you have formed this organization, and I like the fact that there are some charter schools charter schools are fantastic for all that reason because they get to be outside the box. I sit on the board of Langston, and that's one of the reasons I love it because they get to be that outside the box.
Absolutely. Yep. And that's frankly,
But the beast that our Greenville County is that's the challenge.
That is the challenge, and it is our vision to build that partnership. We have met with public education partners and have started brainstorming some ideas with them. One idea is to host a completely voluntary workshop for teachers, educators, faculty to come together and start brainstorming. What can we do to make these students more successful? But that is one of the reasons that we're here. Now, we're just getting started. And of course, the easiest inroad was with the charter schools. But as we gather data to show the successes that we're having, we're hoping to make a more compelling case for Greenville County Schools to work with us.
What's the response that the Greenville County Schools tell you when you talk to them?
Well, we haven't hit it hard with Greenville County Schools at this point. I have talked to at least one school board member. You all might know Derek Lewis. He took a great interest in what we're doing, but he's just one person. So I've had some health challenges at the end of 2018 with broken bones and surgery, and now that I'm getting myself back on track, one of my to-dos is to get to sit down in the school board meetings and start talking more about what we're doing and how we can partner with the schools. But frankly, I look to you. I mean, you know,
I think it'd be beneficial, like with someone like myself, if I could just have you say, okay, they have mental health specialists at schools now, and say, I would love to introduce you to the person at my child's school, because I feel like he is at risk because of the lack of understanding. I also know there's one and possibly two other students that last year were removed from school and suicidal because of the way they were treated by staff there, simply because the staff does not understand and the district is not supporting that school or other schools or that staff. So I would really don't want to lay blame. I just want to make sure, you know, like you're trying to do is find tools and opportunities to help them learn.
right, and then what?
Y'all, I hate to do this, I'm going to time us out real quick.
Yeah, I know.
We are at 1 o'clock, so I just want to give permission to those of you that need to leave to feel free to do so. Those of you that you want to stay and continue this conversation, I'm sure you guys would be willing to hang out for a little bit. If you haven't signed in, please sign in. And also give these guys a big hand.
Thank you.
If y'all are trying to communicate, obviously you know that you can send stuff to me and I can send it out through Greenville Can, but it seems like you've got some good synergy. And remind me, I want to talk to you about some other.
Okay, sounds good. I will. I want to tell both of